On the day my husband was buried, my own father's hands dried my tears. 2 months later, those same hands were covered with my blood. For 3 years, my home became my prison, and the one who should have protected me became my tormentor. Good afternoon, my dear friends. What a joy to see you all again. I'm Josephine Fleming, 72 years old, born and raised in a small town in Kentucky, but today I live here in Denver, Colorado. You can call me Grandma Jo, like everyone around here does. Every single day, I wake up early and tend to my little garden in the backyard. I have my African violets on the porch, some lemon balm plants that make wonderful tea, and the roses that are my greatest pride. In the late afternoon, when the sun isn't so strong, I sit here in this rocking chair on the front porch with my cup of tea. From here, I can see the neighborhood activity, greet my neighbors, and feel that nice breeze coming down from the Rockies. I started gardening after I moved here, almost 20 years ago. It was my way of healing my soul. Each seedling I plant, each flower that blooms, feels like a small victory of life over everything that happened. In the beginning, my hands trembled so much I could barely hold a garden trowel. Today, just look, I have the most colorful garden on the street. My house is simple, but it's my peaceful corner. I have a living room with an antique sofa I inherited from my grandmother, a kitchen where I make those cookies my grandchildren love, and a small guest room I keep just for visitors, especially when my daughter Claire comes with the little ones. The walls are a soft yellow, a color I chose because it brings light and joy. Before I continue my story, I'd like to ask a small favor, if I may. If you enjoy what I'm sharing, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps this grandma continue sharing her stories with more and more people. And you, my dear viewers, tell me in the comments, which part of the country are you watching from? Is there anyone from Kentucky, like where I was born? And what time of day did you find this video? With your morning coffee, after dinner, or maybe during a break from work? I always read everything and feel touched knowing you take time out of your day to listen to this old lady's stories. Let me know, okay? Let's create a chain of kindness. Today, I want to tell you a difficult story, but one that needs to be told. A story about how sometimes danger lives within our own home, and how I found strength to start over when everything seemed lost. A story of pain, yes, but also of new beginnings. Because, my dears, while there's life, there's hope. And while there's hope, we can always find a new path. I was born in Kentucky in the winter of 1953, in a small wooden house near the river that runs through town. It was a simple house with just 3 rooms, the kitchen with a wood stove that heated the entire house on cold days, the bedroom I shared with my 2 brothers, and my parents' bedroom. The bathroom in those days was a small outhouse in the backyard. When it rained heavily, we had to run with an umbrella just to use the facilities. My father, August Fleming, worked as a carpenter. He was a tall, strong man with calloused hands and a deep voice. Everyone in town knew Mr. August and respected him for his good work. My mother, Olivia Richardson, was a seamstress who made clothes for the wealthier families in town. She was a small woman with her hair always tied in a bun, attentive brown eyes, and a tired but sincere smile. My brothers were Ted, 2 years older than me, and Everett, 3 years younger. Ted was my father's pride, learning the carpentry trade from an early age. Everett was my mother's baby, the youngest child she protected as best she could. Childhood in a small town had its magic. We played outside until sunset, playing marbles, hopscotch, or hide and seek. In summer, we snuck off to the river, even though we knew it was forbidden. My friends, Martha, Irene, and Nancy, and I would dip our feet at the edge, while the boys showed off by jumping from the bridge. Our life was simple, but there was plenty on the table. My mother made a squash and beef stew that was finger-licking good, and on Sundays we had pot roast, as tradition demanded. My father would bring the meat, and my mother would cook it with potatoes and carrots, with that aroma that attracted the neighbors. At school, I was a dedicated student. I especially liked English and history classes. Mrs. Joyce said I had a way with words and always encouraged me to read. She was the one who lent me the first books I read, stories that took me far away from that small town. But not everything was rosy in childhood. My father, as hard-working as he was, had a difficult temper. When he drank, which happened almost every weekend, he became aggressive. He never hit us. That wasn't his way. But he yelled at my mother for the smallest things. "Olivia, this food has no salt," or "Where's my clean shirt?" My mother would bow her head and endure it silently. She always said, "Joe, women need to be patient. That's just how men are." I grew up seeing that and promised myself I would never be like my mother. I would never bow my head to any man, no matter how much I cared for him. A child's promise that life would later test in ways I could never have imagined. On Sundays, the whole family went to the Baptist church in town. My mother insisted. I wore my only good dress, which she sewed herself and adjusted as I grew. After church, we'd walk in the town square, buy popcorn from Old Nelson, and listen to the town band play. In winter, we gathered around the wood stove. My mother told old family stories about how her grandparents came from Ireland in search of a better life. My father spoke little about his past. I only knew he was the son of small sheep farmers from the region. I grew up like that, between small-town tales, hard work, and studies. I learned to sew from my mother and sometimes helped with small repairs for neighbors, earning a little money that I kept in an empty coffee can hidden under my bed. I dreamed of one day leaving, seeing Louisville, maybe even New York City. The school only went up to what we called junior high back then. To continue my studies, I would have had to go to Louisville or Lexington, but my family couldn't afford it. So when I turned 14, I started working as an assistant in the only pharmacy in town. The owner, Mr. Albert, was an elderly gentleman full of knowledge about herbs and home remedies. He taught me a lot, not just about medications, but about life. It was at the pharmacy that I met different people who came from other towns and even other states. I heard stories of distant places and stored every detail in my memory, feeding my desire to see the world beyond our small town. When I turned 17, at a church picnic, I met a young man who would change my life forever. He was passing through town, worked as a traveling salesman, and had that air of someone who knew the world. His name was Isaac Silverman, and his blue eyes won me over during our first dance under the stars. The courtship with Isaac was like a dream for that small-town girl. He came to town every 2 months, bringing small but meaningful gifts: a hair ribbon, a book of poetry, an inexpensive perfume that to me was worth gold. In the letters we exchanged between his visits, he told me about the cities he knew, and I imagined what it would be like to live beyond our town. After a year of courtship, Isaac asked me to marry him. My father, suspicious like all small-town men, wanted to know his intentions, if he could support a family. "You can rest easy, Mr. August. I have savings, and I'm going to open my own business in Denver," Isaac said, with that confidence only he had. I married at 19 in 1972 in a simple ceremony at the Baptist church. My mother cried the whole time, divided between the joy of seeing me married and the sadness of seeing me leave. My father, a man of few words, just shook Isaac's hand firmly and said, "Take good care of my daughter." We moved to Denver, where Isaac opened a small leather goods store, wallets, belts, purses, things he bought from regional craftsmen and resold. In the early years, we lived simply but happily. We rented a small house in the Highland neighborhood near downtown. I soon got a job at a fabric store, using what I learned from my mother to advise customers. In 1974, our only daughter, Claire, was born. I had complications during childbirth that prevented me from having more children, but Isaac never minded. "You and Claire are all the family I need," he would say, kissing my forehead. The years went by. Our small store prospered, not enough to make us rich, but enough for us to buy our own house, a small 2-story in the Washington Park neighborhood. Isaac continued to travel through the state to buy merchandise, but now returned home more quickly. "I can't stand being away from you two," he would say. Claire grew up, studied, and became a teacher. In 1995, she married Ernest, an engineer from the University of Colorado. Soon came the grandchildren, Brooke in 1997 and Henry in 2000. Our life seemed perfect, you know? I had a good husband, a college-educated daughter, healthy grandchildren. On weekends, the house filled with the noise of children, the smell of Isaac's barbecue, the laughter. But life has a way of changing everything, my dears. One day, without warning, everything changes. It was on a May morning in 2002. Isaac complained of a sharp pain in his chest while we were having coffee. I thought it was indigestion. He had eaten a lot at dinner the night before. I gave him some peppermint tea, but the pain only got worse. When I realized the severity, I called an ambulance, but it arrived too late. My Isaac had a massive heart attack. He died in my arms before even reaching the hospital. The world collapsed around me. At 49, I found myself a widow, alone in that house full of memories. Claire wanted me to move in with her and Ernest, but their apartment was small, with their 2 children. Besides, I didn't want to be a burden to them. "I'll be fine, honey. I have the store to take care of," I insisted, even though I could barely get out of bed in the morning. That's when my father came back into my life. My mother had passed away years ago in 1990. My brother Ted died young in a car accident. Everett was in Ohio with his own family. My father, widowed and alone in Kentucky, was 78, but still a strong man. "Daughter, I'm moving to Denver. I'll stay with you until you recover from this blow," he said over the phone, a week after Isaac's funeral. At that moment, his voice was a comfort. Someone who cared, a family member who would be by my side. My father arrived on a rainy June afternoon. He brought only 2 old suitcases and his carpentry tools. "I'll fix everything in this house," he promised, looking around with critical eyes. Isaac wasn't very good with repairs, was he? At first, his presence was comforting. He fixed things around the house, helped me with the store, cooked badly, but he cooked. When I cried at night, missing Isaac, my father would sit at the foot of my bed and say, "It will pass, daughter. Everything passes." But after a month, I began to notice changes. My father criticized everything, how I ran the store, the clothes I wore, even the way I spoke. "You're too fancy," he would say. "Seems like you forgot you're the daughter of simple folk." Once, I met a friend at the market and agreed to have coffee with her. When I got home, my father was furious. "Where have you seen a widow in mourning strolling around? What will people think? That you're already looking for another man?" I tried to explain it was just coffee with a friend of many years, but he wouldn't listen. He hit the table so hard that the flower vase fell and broke. "As long as I'm in this house, you'll behave like a decent widow." That was the first clear sign that something was wrong. But I was so fragile from losing Isaac, so vulnerable, that I just bowed my head and apologized. My God, how I regret that today. Things got worse when my father started pushing away my friends. When someone called, he said I was resting or indisposed. When they tried to visit me, he met them at the door and said it wasn't a good time. "She needs peace and quiet," he explained. "Better not to disturb her." Little by little, I became isolated. I still went to the store, but now my father went with me. He sat in a corner, watching everything, controlling everything. He started giving opinions about suppliers, about prices, about employees. "That woman is stealing from you," he would say about Marlene, my trusted saleswoman for years. "And that boy is just wasting time. You have to fire him." Claire noticed something was wrong when she came to visit with the children 3 months after my father arrived. "Mom, you're so thin, so worn out," she commented, concerned. I smiled weakly and said it was just grief. My father, always nearby, added, "Your mother is fine. She just needs time. I'm taking care of her." That night, after Claire left, we had our first serious argument. I told my father I wanted to spend the weekend at my daughter's house. "What are you going to do there? Complain to your son-in-law? Be a burden to your daughter?" he yelled. "I'm going to see my grandchildren, Dad." I have the right to see my family, I replied, feeling a courage I hadn't had in months. That's when he slapped me for the first time, hard, across the face, taking me by surprise. Don't raise your voice to me. Don't forget who I am. I fell sitting on the sofa with my hand on my hot red face, my eyes full of tears. Not from physical pain, but from shock and humiliation. My own father. How could he? I want you to leave my house, I whispered, trembling. He laughed. A cold, frightening laugh. Your house? This house was bought with your husband's money. He's dead. You're just an incompetent widow who can't take care of herself. Without me, you're nothing. That night, I locked myself in my room and cried until I fell asleep. In the morning, my father acted as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, commented on the weather, talked about fixing the gutter on the roof. I, still in shock, didn't know how to react. Part of me wanted to believe it was an isolated incident, that he was stressed, that it wouldn't happen again. But that slap was just the beginning of 3 years of hell that almost cost me my life. After that first slap, my life turned into a nightmare that repeated day after day. My father established strict rules that I had to follow, schedules for everything, from waking up to going to bed. I couldn't talk on the phone without him being in the room listening. I couldn't receive visitors without his authorization. The few times Claire came with the children, he transformed into the dedicated grandfather, the concerned father. A perfect mask. Dad, this can't continue. The house is mine. I want you to go back to Kentucky, I tried to say once, gathering all my courage. His response was a punch to the stomach that left me breathless. Ungrateful! After everything I do for you, you think you can live alone? Without me, you would have lost everything. Gradually, he took complete control of the store. I still went to work, but I was like an employee. I could no longer make decisions. I didn't know how much money came in or went out. Everything passed through his hands. Women don't have a head for business, he would say. Isaac spoiled you too much. The money I earned went straight to his hands. He gave me a ridiculous allowance, as if I were a child. I had to ask for money even to buy deodorant or a pack of sanitary napkins. It was humiliating. Over time, the physical aggression became more frequent and more violent. Anything was a reason. Food that wasn't the way he wanted, a bill that came with a higher value, a comment that he interpreted as a challenge to his authority. I remember one night when I dreamed of Isaac. In the dream, we were at the beach, happy, holding hands. I woke up crying softly, missing my husband, the life we had. My father heard my crying and came into the room furious. Still crying for that useless man? It's been over a year since he died. Forget him once and for all. Don't talk about Isaac that way, I murmured through tears. He was a good man. Those words enraged him. He yanked the blanket off my bed and pulled me by the hair. A good man? Then what am I? I who left everything to come take care of you. I who prevented you from sinking after he left you. He began to beat me with his belt, on my back, my legs, my arms. I screamed, begged him to stop, but he was blind with rage. He only stopped when I fell to the floor, curled up like a wounded animal. Clean up that blood and go to sleep. Tomorrow you have to wake up early to make my coffee, he said, before leaving the room and slamming the door. I spent the whole night awake, trembling with pain and fear. The next day I couldn't go to the store. My body was covered in bruises. I had a cut on my eyebrow where the belt buckle hit me. My father called Marlene saying I had the flu. Josephine isn't coming today or tomorrow. You all figure it out there. It was 2 days locked in the house, recovering enough to be able to disguise the injuries with makeup and long-sleeved clothes, even in the heat. When I returned to the store, Marlene noticed something was wrong. Mrs. Joe, are you okay? You look so worn out. I almost told her everything. I almost asked for help. But at that moment, my father appeared at the back door. One look from him was enough for me to swallow my words and force a smile. I'm fine, Marlene. It was just a bad flu. The worst part wasn't the physical abuse, you know. It was the psychological terror. I never knew when he would explode, what would trigger his fury. I lived in a constant state of alertness, always tense, always afraid. My stomach was constantly upset. I lost weight. My hair started falling out. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I tried several times to escape that situation. One afternoon, when he went out to take care of something at the bank, I called Claire. "Honey, I need to tell you something," I began, my voice trembling. But before I could continue, I heard the front door opening. He had returned early. I hung up the phone in panic. Claire called back several times, worried. When I finally answered, with my father by my side, I made up that I had called just to ask about the grandchildren. She didn't quite believe it, but she didn't insist either. I think deep down she suspected something was wrong, but couldn't imagine the extent of the horror. When my daughter visited us, I tried to give signals. I wore long-sleeved blouses even in the heat to hide the bruises. I was always nervous, spoke little. Once, she asked me directly, "Mom, is Grandpa treating you well?" Before I could answer, my father intervened. "Of course, your mother is just getting cranky with age. One of these days I'll go back to Kentucky and leave her alone to see if she appreciates me." That was his tactic, threatening to abandon me, as if his presence were a favor, as if I couldn't survive without him. And the worst part is that after so long being diminished and abused, I almost believed it. In 2004, things got even worse. My father sold the store without consulting me. He simply appeared at home one day and said, "I sold that dump. It wasn't profitable. It was just work." I was in shock. The store that Isaac and I had built with so much sacrifice, the business that was my livelihood and my connection to the outside world, had been sold without my consent. How? "How could you do that? The store was mine," I shouted, losing control. "Your name wasn't even on the documents, you fool. It was all in Isaac's name. I, as a father, am the natural heir since you didn't have a son," he lied blatantly. In truth, the store was in both my name and Isaac's, but at that moment, I had no way to prove it. All the documents were with him. That night was one of the worst. He beat me with such violence that I thought I would die. He punched my face until my lips split open, kicked my ribs when I fell to the floor. When I tried to protect myself, he twisted my arm until I heard the crack of the bone breaking. I passed out from pain. When I woke up, I was thrown on the bed, alone. My arm was swollen, deformed. Breathing hurt so much, I thought my lungs were punctured. I spent the whole night moaning in pain, but too afraid to ask for help. In the morning, my father came into the room as if nothing had happened. He looked at me, at my swollen arm, and said, "I'll take you to the hospital. You fell down the stairs last night, understand? You got up to drink water and fell down the stairs." At the hospital, I repeated the story he forced me to tell. The doctors looked suspicious, but didn't question it. They put my arm in a cast, gave me painkillers for the pain in my ribs, which had 2 cracks, and sent me home. "See? You can't even walk around the house without falling. How do you think you were going to run a store by yourself?" he said on the way back, reinforcing the lie that I now almost believed. With the sale of the store, I lost my last contact with the outside world. I stayed at home all day, cooking and cleaning with just one arm, always under my father's watchful eye. He went out to drink with new friends he made in the city, men his age who spent the day at the bar discussing politics and football. When he returned, usually drunk, the terror began again. He criticized the food, the cleanliness of the house, my appearance. "You look like a sloppy old woman," he would say, although I was only 51 years old. "No man would want you in this state." Claire tried to visit, but my father always made up excuses. "Your mother has a migraine today," or "We went out to visit some relatives." When she insisted, he created arguments, saying that she only appeared to ask for money or to disturb me. Gradually, my daughter's visits became more rare. She had her own life, her children, her work. And my father was an expert at pushing people away, at creating stories that justified our isolation. By 2005, almost 3 years after he moved into my house, I was just a shadow of the woman I once was. I lived in a constant state of terror, with chronic pain from repeated aggression, isolated from the world, without my own money, without autonomy. My father controlled everything: the phone, the money from the sale of the store that he kept, for emergencies, even the letters that arrived. I later discovered that he intercepted Claire's correspondence, never giving me the cards she sent on special dates. One night, after returning particularly drunk from the bar, he started an argument for no reason. He accused me of having gone through his room, of stealing money from his wallet. I denied it, of course, because it was all a lie. But the truth didn't matter. He just needed an excuse to release his anger. He started by hitting me with open hands, then closed his fists. Each blow was accompanied by insults, by humiliations. He called me a thief, a tramp, useless. He said he should have left me in the gutter, that I didn't deserve his help, that I was a dead weight. I tried to defend myself, curling up in the corner of the living room, protecting my face with my arms. This only enraged him more. He grabbed the floor lamp and started hitting me with it. The metal base opened a cut on my head, blood ran down my face, into my eyes, into my mouth. "Stop, Dad! For God's sake, you're going to kill me," I begged, feeling like I was going to pass out. "Shut up! Nobody will hear your screams here," he roared, continuing to beat me. The last blow was a kick to my abdomen, so strong I felt something rupture inside me. A sharp pain, followed by a wet warmth between my legs. I was bleeding, and it wasn't the common blood from a cut. It was internal bleeding, serious. I fell to the floor, almost unconscious, feeling the blood soaking my clothes. The last thing I saw before I passed out was my father's face, finally showing not anger, but fear. Fear of having gone too far this time. Fear of losing his power over me in the most definitive way. When I regained consciousness, I was on a hospital stretcher. The fluorescent lights hurt my eyes, and there was the constant noise of machines around me. I tried to move, but my entire body screamed in pain. I felt tubes and needles connected to my arms. A nurse noticed I had woken up and approached. "Easy, ma'am. You're at the university hospital. You had severe internal bleeding. You've already had emergency surgery." My mind was confused, the memories fragmented. Flashes of the last beating, the blood, the look of panic on my father's face. How had I gotten here? Who had called the ambulance? I didn't have much time to think. Soon I noticed my father sitting in a chair in the corner of the room. His face was composed in a mask of paternal concern, but his eyes had that silent warning that I knew so well. "Oh, daughter, what a scare you gave me," he said, approaching the bed with false solicitude. "When I found you collapsed in the bathroom, I almost had a heart attack." It was the new version of the story. No longer a fall down the stairs, but a fainting in the bathroom. I closed my eyes, unable to respond, feeling a wave of despair engulf me. Even here, in the hospital, under medical care, I wasn't free from him. The nurse smiled, not noticing the sinister dynamic. "Your father has been here since you arrived, 2 days ago. He hasn't left your side even to eat properly." 2 days. I had been unconscious for 2 days. And during all that time, he had the opportunity to build his narrative, to present himself as the dedicated father, concerned about his sick daughter. Who would suspect that that white-haired gentleman, looking frail despite the strength I knew well, was capable of such violence? A doctor entered the room. Dr. Maurice, according to the badge on his white coat. He looked at me with a serious expression. "Mrs. Josephine, you suffered a severe abdominal trauma that caused a rupture in your spleen and significant internal bleeding. We had to perform an emergency splenectomy, the removal of the spleen. In addition, you have multiple rib fractures, bruises in various stages of healing all over your body, and signs of old fractures that were not properly treated." He paused, looking at my father and then back at me. There was an unformulated question in his eyes, a suspicion. "You said she fell in the bathroom?" he asked my father, in a tone that revealed his disbelief. "Yes, doctor. My daughter has low blood pressure problems. She's always fainting. She's fallen several times. I always tell her to be careful, but—" "These injuries," Dr. Maurice interrupted, "are not consistent with a fall, sir. The distribution of bruises, fractures at different stages of healing, this suggests a pattern." My father stiffened, but maintained the expression of concerned innocence. "What pattern, doctor? I don't understand." "I'd like to speak with the patient alone, please," said the doctor, in a tone that admitted no objection. "But I'm her father. I have the right to—" "It's standard procedure, sir. Please wait outside. The social worker would also like to speak with you." My father gave me a look that was a mixture of threat and warning before leaving. That look said it all. "If you open your mouth, you'll regret it." When we were alone, Dr. Maurice pulled up a chair and sat beside my bed. His voice changed, became softer, gentler. "Mrs. Josephine, I'm speaking to you as a doctor, but also as a human being. The injuries you present are not accidental. I see this more times than I'd like in the emergency room." I remained silent, fear paralyzing me. 3 years of conditioning, of psychological terror, told me to deny, to protect my aggressor, to fear the consequences of speaking the truth. "You are safe here," he continued. "No one will enter this room without your permission. I can call the police, I can activate the protection network. But I need you to tell me the truth. Was it your father who did this to you?" My eyes filled with tears. I wanted so badly to speak. I wanted so badly to free myself from that nightmare. But the words wouldn't come out. The fear was greater than everything. I fell," I murmured, repeating the lie that had become my shield and my prison. Dr. Maurice said nothing for a moment. He just held my hand gently, a simple gesture of humanity that I hadn't experienced in so long. "Mrs. Josephine, here's my card with my personal cell phone. When you're ready to talk, call me any time, day or night." He placed the small card under my pillow, where my father wouldn't see it. "Until then, I've invented a post-operative complication that will require you to stay hospitalized for at least another week. Your father will not be able to stay in the room at night, only during visiting hours. This will give you some time to think." That night, alone in the hospital room, I cried as I hadn't cried in years. They weren't tears of physical pain, although that was immense. They were tears of a deeper pain, the pain of realizing what my life had become. From a victim of grief to a victim of violence, from an independent woman to a prisoner in my own home, I remembered my Isaac, the love we shared, the life we built together. What would he think if he saw me now, so destroyed, so diminished? And Claire, my daughter, whom I could barely see because of my father's lies and manipulations? And my grandchildren, who were growing up without really knowing me? That hospital dawn, alone with my thoughts for the first time in years, something began to change inside me. A small spark of resistance, of dignity, that I thought was extinct, began to burn again. In the following nights, that spark grew. The night shift nurse, Christina, noticed my agitation, my fear as visiting hours approached. With gentleness, she began to talk to me. She didn't pressure me, just listened when I decided to speak. One night, I told her about how happy I had been with Isaac, how we had managed our store, how we raised our daughter. I spoke of a life that now seemed to belong to someone else. "And what happened to that strong woman, Mrs. Josephine?" asked Christina while checking my vital signs. The question caught me by surprise. What had happened to me? How had I allowed things to get to this point? "I think she got lost along the way," I answered, feeling the tears return. "I'm sure she didn't," said Christina, adjusting my pillow. "I think she's in there, waiting to come back." On the 5th day of hospitalization, while my father had gone out to lunch, I received an unexpected visit. Claire entered the room, her face pale with concern. "Mom!" Mom, my God, what happened? Grandpa only told me yesterday that you were hospitalized. Seeing my daughter after so long, without my father's oppressive presence, was like a dam breaking. I began to cry uncontrollably, unable to speak. Claire sat on the edge of the bed and held my hands. Mom, what's going on? You hardly call me. You hardly visit us. When we go to your house, Grandpa always says you're tired or sick. And now this. I looked into my daughter's eyes, so similar to mine, and made the most difficult and most important decision of my life. Claire, I whispered, I need to tell you something. I didn't fall in the bathroom. Your grandfather, he's been hurting me. For a long time. The shock on my daughter's face gave way to disbelief, then to horrified understanding when I slowly lifted my hospital gown, showing the bruises that covered my body. Since when? She asked, her voice trembling. Since he came to live with me, almost 3 years. Claire covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. Why did you never tell me? Why didn't you ask for help? I tried, I replied, remembering the interrupted calls, the watched visits. He wouldn't let me. He controlled everything, Claire, the phone, the money, who could visit me. He sold the store without my authorization. He said no one would believe me, that I was just a crazy old woman. At that moment, the door to the room opened. My father entered, carrying a bag of fruit that would certainly be his public demonstration of paternal care. When he saw Claire sitting on my bed, his face hardened. What are you doing here? He asked my daughter, trying to maintain false cordiality, but not completely hiding his irritation. Claire stood up slowly, facing her grandfather with a look I had never seen before. It was pure fury, controlled only by the still recent shock. I came to see my mother, whom you almost killed. My father turned pale but recovered quickly. What are you talking about, girl? Your mother fell in the bathroom. I saved her life by bringing her to the hospital. I just saw the bruises, Grandpa, all of them, the new ones and the old ones. I just heard everything. Do you think I don't know how to recognize the truth when I hear it? Do you think I don't know my own mother? I saw my father's face transform. The mask of the loving grandfather, the dedicated father, fell completely. In its place was the expression I knew so well, cold, calculating anger. Your mother is confused, he said, taking a step toward the bed. The medications she's taking, she doesn't know what she's saying. Don't come near her, said Claire, placing herself between us. I've already called the police and the attending physician. They're on their way. It was at that moment that I realized I had decided I would not live one more day under the same roof as my abuser. No matter the fear, no matter the threats. I had survived the worst, and now, with my daughter by my side, I found the strength to take the step I couldn't take alone. In that hospital room, my life changed forever. Dr. Maurice returned accompanied by a detective from the domestic violence unit, Sarah Martin, a middle-aged woman with kind but determined eyes. She sat beside my bed while 2 officers waited in the hallway. Mrs. Josephine, I'm Detective Sarah. Your daughter told me what happened, but I need to hear it from you. Are you ready to make a formal complaint? I looked at Claire, who was holding my hand tightly, then at my father, who was sitting in a corner of the room, watched by one of the officers. His eyes still tried to intimidate me, but something had changed. His power over me was broken. Yes, I answered, my voice firmer than I expected. I want to report my father for assault and false imprisonment. For 2 hours, I told everything. The beginning after Isaac's death, how care turned into control, the first slap, the beatings that followed, the isolation, the forced sale of the store, the threats, the constant psychological terror. I spoke without stopping, as if a dam had broken after years of containing the truth. The detective took my statement patiently, asking for details, dates, circumstances. Dr. Maurice provided a detailed medical report of all my injuries, old and recent. The evidence was indisputable. My father was arrested right there, handcuffed, and taken to the police station. As he passed by me, he stopped for a moment, "You'll regret this," he murmured. "Without me, you're nothing." For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of those words. "You're wrong, Dad," I replied. "Without you, I can be everything again." I stayed in the hospital for 2 more weeks, recovering from the surgery and other injuries. Claire came every day, sometimes with Ernest, sometimes with the children. Brooke, my 8-year-old granddaughter, brought me colorful drawings to make Grandma's room happier. Henry, only 5 years old, carefully climbed onto the bed and told me the news from school. It was during this period that we began to rebuild the bonds that my father had tried to destroy. Claire cried a lot when she learned everything I had gone through. "Why didn't I notice before, Mom? How could I have been so blind?" "Don't blame yourself, honey," I would say. "He was very clever. He knew how to deceive everyone, and I was very ashamed, very afraid." Detective Sarah visited me regularly, updating me on the case. My father would be indicted for aggravated assault, threats, false imprisonment, and embezzlement. The case had all the elements for a conviction. "You will have to testify in court," she warned me. "Are you prepared for that?" The idea of facing my father in court terrified me, but I knew it was necessary. "I will be ready," I promised. When I was finally discharged, I couldn't return to my house. The memories were too much, and I still didn't feel safe, even with my father detained. Claire insisted that I stay with her, Ernest, and the children. "We have the guest room, Mom. It's not big, but it's yours for as long as you need." I moved temporarily to their apartment. It was cramped, but full of love and security. In the first nights, I woke up screaming, terrified by nightmares where my father returned to punish me. Claire would come running, sit on the edge of the bed, and hold my hand until I calmed down. The judicial process was long and painful. I had to relive everything, tell the most humiliating and traumatic details in front of strangers. My father hired a lawyer who tried to discredit me, suggesting I was senile, confused, that I had mental problems. But the medical evidence didn't lie, and I wasn't alone anymore. Marlene, my former store employee, testified in my favor, telling how my behavior had changed, how I appeared with poorly hidden bruises, how my father controlled all aspects of the business until he sold it. "She was a strong, independent woman," Marlene told the judge. "After her father moved into her house, she wilted like a flower without water." The trial lasted months, but in the end, justice prevailed. My father was sentenced to 8 years in prison, without the right to an initial semi-open regime, due to the severity of the assaults and the fact that I was considered a vulnerable person by justice. When the sentence was read, he looked at me with hatred, but I held his gaze. That man no longer had power over me. The hardest part came afterward, recovering my financial independence. I discovered that my father had not only sold the store, but spent almost all the money. He bought a new car, lost a lot in gambling, spent on expensive drinks. Of the sale value, less than a third remained. That's when Marlene appeared with a proposal that would change my life again. She had opened a small craft store in downtown Denver and needed a partner. "Mrs. Joe, you know the business, you have experience, and I have the space and the contacts. We can start small with crochet pieces, knitting, embroidery." I hesitated. After everything I'd been through, the idea of starting over at 52 seemed scary. But Marlene insisted, and Claire encouraged me. "Mom, you've always known how to do business. Grandpa Isaac always said you were the brains behind your store." With the little money I recovered from the forced sale, I invested in the partnership with Marlene. Art and Thread started small, in a rented space near the central square. We sold local crafts, but soon began to produce our own pieces. I rediscovered the pleasure of working with my hands, of creating, of seeing a business grow. Emotional recovery was a slower process. On Detective Sarah's recommendation, I began attending a support group for women victims of domestic violence. At first, I could barely talk. I sat at the back of the room and just listened to the stories of other women. Stories of pain, but also of overcoming. Lauren, the psychologist who coordinated the group, played a fundamental role in my recovery. "Josephine, the shame isn't yours, it's the aggressor's," she always said. "You're a survivor, not a victim." Gradually, I found my voice again. I began to share my story, first in whispers, then with more firmness. Each time I told what I had gone through, the power of those memories over me diminished a little. After 6 months living with Claire and her family, I felt it was time to have my own space again. I couldn't go back to the house where I had suffered so much. That house was sold, part of the process of closing that chapter of my life. With Claire and Ernest's help, I found a small apartment to rent, close to them and the store. It was a modest place with just 1 bedroom, living room, kitchen, and bathroom, but it was mine. I decorated it with cheerful colors, placed plants in the windows, made it a sanctuary where I felt safe. For the first time in years, I had my own keys, opened and closed my own doors, decided my own schedules. The store prospered slowly. In the first year, it barely covered expenses. But Marlene and I were persistent. We expanded the product offering, started giving small craft courses at the back of the store, created a name in the city. In the second year, we already had a loyal clientele. The recovery process wasn't linear. There were good days and bad days. Days when I woke up full of energy and optimism, and days when fear and memories paralyzed me. On difficult nights, when the nightmares returned, I would call Claire or Lauren. Sometimes I just needed to hear a friendly voice on the other end of the line to remind me that I was no longer alone or helpless. One of the hardest things was dealing with anger. Anger at my father for having abused my trust and subjected me to so much suffering. But also anger at myself for not having reacted earlier, for having allowed the situation to reach that extreme point. Lauren helped me understand that the fault was never mine. "Abuse works through isolation and terror," she explained. "Your father knew exactly what he was doing. He took advantage of your vulnerability after losing your husband. That doesn't make you weak, Josephine. It makes him a predator." In 2007, 2 years after my hospitalization, something happened that I considered impossible. I began to feel happy again. It wasn't a happiness like the one I knew with Isaac. That was unique and would never return. It was a more mature, more serene happiness, born from the awareness that I had survived the worst and rebuilt my life. Art and Thread had become a small success in Denver. We had expanded to a larger space, hired 2 employees, and our products were sold even in other cities through partnerships with similar stores. My relationship with Claire and her family was stronger than ever. Brooke and Henry spent almost every weekend with me. I taught Brooke to embroider and crochet, skills I learned from my mother. Henry preferred when I told stories about small-town life, fascinated by that world so different from his own. That same year, at one of the support group meetings, I met Teresa, a lady from Nebraska who had come to live in Denver after separating from her violent husband. We had different stories, but the same determination to start over. We became inseparable friends, supporting each other in difficult moments and celebrating the small victories of everyday life. It was Teresa who encouraged me to go back to school. "Josephine, you always wanted to finish your studies. Now is the time." At 54, I enrolled in a GED program to complete high school. It was scary at first, being in a classroom after so many years. But I discovered that I still loved learning, that my mind was eager for knowledge. I graduated the following year, with Claire, Ernest, and the grandchildren proudly watching the ceremony. My father served part of his sentence and was released for good behavior after 5 years. I was apprehensive when I heard the news, fearing he might try to find me, to take revenge. But Detective Sarah assured me that the restraining order was still valid. He could not approach me or my family. I learned through indirect sources that he returned to Kentucky. I never saw him again, and never wanted to see him again. Some wounds are too deep to heal completely. I learned to live with them, not to let them define who I was, but I could never completely forgive him. And that's okay too. In 2010, at 57, I felt it was time for a new beginning. Denver held many memories, some good, others too painful. Marlene was ready to take over the store on her own, and I had saved enough to fulfill an old dream, to return to my roots, but not to Kentucky. I decided to move to Boulder, where I had distant relatives and where I could start over once more, this time on my own terms. Claire was sad about my decision to move, but she understood. "You need to do what's best for your happiness, Mom. And Boulder isn't that far. We can visit each other frequently." In Boulder, I rented a simple little house with a yard where I started my first garden. I planted roses, dahlias, violets, colorful flowers that cheer the soul. I learned that taking care of plants is a form of therapy. Seeing something grow and flourish under my care gave me a sense of purpose. I also started volunteering at a shelter for women victims of violence. It wasn't easy to hear those stories so similar to mine, to see the fear in the eyes of those women, many of them so young. But I could offer something that no one else could, the understanding of someone who had been in their place and survived. If I managed to start over at 52 after 3 years of abuse, you can too, I would say. And I saw in their eyes that small spark of hope that Dr. Maurice and Nurse Christina had lit in me years before. At the end of 2010, I received a phone call that would once again change the course of my life. It was Claire, with an unexpected proposal. "Mom, Ernest has been invited to be a professor at CU Denver. We're moving back to Denver. And we're looking for a bigger house with space for you if you want to come back." The invitation caught me by surprise. Return to Denver? Face the memories of that city again? But then I realized those memories no longer had power over me. I had faced my demons. I had rebuilt my life twice. Denver was also the place where my grandchildren were growing up, where I had friends like Marlene, where I knew every street, every square. "I'll think about it, honey," I replied. And I thought, for weeks. I consulted Lauren, talked with Teresa, reflected on what I really wanted for this new phase of my life. In early 2011, I made my decision. I returned to Denver, not to live with Claire and her family, but to a small house I bought with my savings in the same neighborhood as them. A house with a large backyard where I could grow my flowers and a front porch where I could sit on summer afternoons to have my tea and watch life go by. My story of overcoming began in that hospital room when I finally found the courage to say enough. But it continued far beyond that moment. It continued in every small decision I made since then to regain my autonomy, in every time I chose to face my fears instead of letting them paralyze me. And it continues to this day, when I look in the mirror and see not just the wrinkles that time and suffering have left, but mainly the eyes of a woman who discovered her own strength when she needed it most. Here I am in 2025 at 72, sitting on the porch of my house in Denver, watching the roses I planted in the front garden. It's a simple house, but it's my little paradise. The walls are painted a soft yellow, a color I chose because it brings light and joy. I have my guest room always ready for when Claire and her family come to visit, or when my grandchildren, now adults, decide to spend a weekend with Grandma. Brooke is 28 now, graduated in psychology, and works at a care center for women victims of violence. She says my story was her inspiration for choosing this profession. "Grandma, I want to help other women find the strength that you found," she told me once, and I confess I cried with emotion. Henry, at 25, followed in his father's footsteps and is finishing engineering. He's a sweet boy, always concerned about visiting me, checking if I'm okay, if I need anything. Sometimes I think he tries to compensate for the male figure that failed so terribly in my life. "Grandpa Isaac would be very proud of you," I tell him, and his eyes shine. My day-to-day is peaceful. I wake up early, with the sun. I have my tea watching the garden wake up. Then I take care of the plants. I have my African violets on the porch, the lemon balm I use to make tea, and of course my roses, which are my greatest pride. Gardening came into my life as therapy and became a passion. Each flower that blooms is a small victory, a reminder that life goes on, that beauty can be born even after the storm. 3 times a week, I go to the community center in the neighborhood, where I teach craft classes to women from the community. I teach crochet, knitting, embroidery, skills I learned from my mother and perfected over the years. Many of my students are women who have faced difficult situations: domestic violence, abandonment, poverty. Crafts are not just a means of expression for them, but also a possibility of extra income. Miss Jo, they call me, with respect and affection. They don't know my whole story, just enough to understand that we share more than a love for crafts. We share the experience of having survived, of having rebuilt our lives with the pieces that remained. In the afternoons, when the sun isn't so strong, I like to sit on the front porch with my tea. From there, I can see the movement of the street, greet the neighbors, feel that nice breeze coming down from the mountains. Nancy, my neighbor from the house next door, sometimes joins me for a chat. She's 75 and also a widow. We talk about everything: the plants, the grandchildren, the neighborhood news, the recipes we've tried. On Sundays, the house fills with life. Claire and Ernest come for lunch, sometimes with their children when they're in town. I prepare that beef stew that was Isaac's favorite, make potato salad, and Ernest brings the meat for the barbecue that he himself prepares in the small backyard. These are precious moments, full of that good noise of family gathered together. My relationship with Claire strengthened immensely after everything we went through. There was a time when she blamed herself for not noticing earlier what was happening. "I should have noticed, Mom. I should have asked more questions, insisted more," she would say. But over the years, and with the help of therapy that we did together for a while, she understood that the fault was never hers. The fault was exclusively my father's, who was a master at manipulation and deception. Today, we are not just mother and daughter, but close friends. We talk about everything. We support each other. When Ernest had a health problem 2 years ago, a scare with high blood pressure, it was I who held things together, taking care of their house while Claire divided herself between the hospital and work at the school where she teaches. Financially, I live simply, but without deprivation. I have my small retirement, supplemented by what I earn giving craft classes and selling some pieces I make. It's not much, but it's enough for my needs. I learned that true wealth is not in material things, but in the relationships we build, in the peace we find within ourselves. As for my father, I don't know if he's still alive. He would be 101 today. After he got out of prison and returned to Kentucky, I completely lost contact. It was a conscious decision, part of my healing process. Some bonds, when too toxic, need to be cut for us to move forward. For many years, I carried anger and resentment. How could a father do what he did to a daughter? This question tormented me for a long time. But gradually, with the help of therapy that I continued for years, I learned that I would not find this answer and that continuing to seek it would only keep me tied to the past. Today, I wouldn't say I've forgiven. Some things are beyond forgiveness. But I found a form of peace, of acceptance. What he did is part of my history, but it doesn't define who I am. The woman who survived, who rebuilt herself, who found strength where she thought there was none. That's me. I have my scars, physical and emotional. On cold nights, the old fracture in my arm still hurts. There are occasional nightmares, less frequent now, but still disturbing when they occur. And certain noises, a door slamming hard, glass breaking, can still make me startle, bringing momentary flashbacks of those terrible years. But I learned to live with these sequels. They are memories of a battle I won, not of a defeat. Each scar is a testimony to my resilience, my refusal to be destroyed. I maintain contact with some people who were fundamental in my recovery process. Marlene, my former partner and always friend, now retired, comes for coffee with me every Thursday. Lauren, the psychologist who helped me so much, moved to Salt Lake City, but we still talk on the phone regularly. Teresa, my friend from the Boulder days, passed away 5 years ago, a loss that still hurts when I think of her. Life, as I discovered, is made of these comings and goings, these meetings and farewells. The important thing is to move forward, one day at a time, finding beauty and meaning even in small things. Today, when I look back at everything I've lived through, I feel a mixture of sadness for the suffering, but also pride for the woman I became through it. I wouldn't wish anyone to go through what I went through. But if my story can give hope to someone who is living their own personal hell, then all this suffering was not in vain. This is me, Josephine Fleming, at 72, in my house in Denver. A survivor. A woman who learned in the hardest way that it's never too late to start over, that the strength we need is often within us, just waiting to be discovered. My dear friends who have come this far with me, this difficult story I've shared wasn't easy to tell, but I felt I needed to. Because I know that unfortunately, there are many Josephines out there trapped in cycles of violence, feeling alone, believing there is no way out. If you're going through something similar, I want you to know, from the bottom of my heart, you are not alone. The abuse is never your fault, and always, always, there is a path to freedom. I learned that age doesn't define our strength, but rather our capacity to start each day anew. I was 52 when I finally freed myself. Many would say it was too late to rebuild a life, but it's never too late to seek happiness, to demand respect, to say, enough. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. I carry marks on my body and soul, but they don't define me. They only show the path I've traveled. Life taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. Even on the darkest days, when I thought I couldn't take another blow, a small flame of hope remained lit within me. I never allowed my dignity to be stolen, even when they tried to take everything from me. In the end, it was that dignity that saved me, that gave me the strength to denounce my abuser, to face him in court, to rebuild my life. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. It's precisely when we think we've reached our limit that we discover reserves of strength we didn't know existed. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to live with them and still smile. There are days when the memories still hurt, when the physical and emotional scars make themselves present. But I learned not to let the pain of the past steal the joy of the present. My story is not about what was done to me, but about how I chose to respond. I could have become bitter, distrustful, closed off to the world. Instead, I chose to open my heart, to help other women, to find beauty in the small things of life. If you are suffering violence, no matter what kind, seek help. In any country, there are organizations, people, and authorities ready to support you. Don't be ashamed, don't blame yourself. The aggressor counts on your silence to continue the abuse. Break that silence. Often the first step is the hardest. For me, it was admitting to my daughter what was happening. But once that step was taken, each one that came after became a little easier. Look for signs of abuse in your life, or in the lives of people close to you. Excessive control, isolation, constant criticism, diminishing self-esteem. These are often the first signs, even before physical violence begins. And if you know someone who may be in an abusive situation, reach out. Offer support without judgment. Sometimes all a person needs is to know they're not alone, that someone believes them. Dignity and respect are universal values, no matter where you are. No one has the right to hurt you, to control your life, to diminish who you are, not even someone from your family. Today, at 72, I can say I've found peace. It's not a perfect peace, without shadows from the past. It's a realistic peace, which recognizes what I've lived through, but doesn't allow those experiences to define my present or my future. I learned that true strength is not in never falling, but in getting up every time. Each time I fell, I got up a little stronger, a little wiser, a little more determined not to allow the cycle of violence to continue. Abuse leaves invisible scars, but recovery shows that we can flourish even after the storm. like my roses, which face the harsh Colorado winter only to return more beautiful in spring. I discovered that my voice, even trembling, has power when I decide to use it. It was by using my voice, breaking the silence, that I began my journey to freedom. And it's by using my voice now, sharing my story, that I hope to help others find their own strength. Age has given me the wisdom to understand that it's never too late to start over. At 52, 57, 65 years old, I always found new beginnings, new challenges, new joys. Life continues as long as we are willing to live it fully. My experience taught me that our story doesn't end in the painful chapters. There's always a blank page waiting to be written, a new direction to be taken, a new dream to be dreamed. I learned that surviving is a form of resistance, and living well is the best revenge. Each day of peace, each moment of joy, each sincere smile is a victory against those who tried to destroy me. My dear friends, if this story touched your heart, if you felt a connection with what I shared, I ask that you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell right now. It's not just for me. It's for all the women who are still trapped in abusive situations and need to know there is hope, there is a way out. Each subscription is a way of saying, I care about stories like mine. It's a way of supporting this very important work of giving voice to those who are often silenced by violence. And please share this video immediately with anyone you think needs to hear this message. It could be that friend who has a suspicious relationship, that cousin who disappeared from family gatherings, that colleague who always seems scared. A simple share can be the starting point for a transformed life. It can be the light at the end of the tunnel for someone who is suffering in silence. Leave in the comments the word liberty if you watched until here. This will be our code, our way of recognizing each other as people who care, who believe that every woman deserves to live without fear, without violence, with dignity. Do it now. Don't wait even one more minute. Your action today can save a life tomorrow. Thank you for listening to me, for walking with me on this journey of memories. Always remember, it's never too late to start over. It's never too late to seek the happiness you deserve. And you never, ever are alone.